The battle between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, two candidates who definitely come with some baggage, no matter how you slice it. Clinton has those emails and allegations she fostered too cozy a relationship between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department. Trump has his bankruptcies, a penchant for off-the-cuff remarks, apparently offending millions. Now he's bringing in some of the most controversial names from the media world to advise him, with ousted Fox News head Roger Ailes reportedly helping out with debate prep, and Breitbart executive chair Steve Bannon serving as his new campaign CEO, a man whom Bloomberg Businessweek named, quote, the most dangerous political operative in America back in October. They say those who don't learn from history are, that's right, doomed to repeat it, and that's exactly what my next guest is looking to help future presidents avoid. Elaine Kamarck's great new book is called Why Presidents Fail and How They Can Succeed Again, something she knows a thing or two about after 4 years in the Clinton White House and serving as a senior campaign advisor to Al Gore. She's now a public policy lecturer at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Elaine, it's great to see you.
Great to see you again.
You may not like this because I know you're here to sell this book, but humor me for a minute. A prior book of yours, Primary Politics, everything, I don't know, everything you need to know, whatever. Let's talk about that first. This year's primary gave the American people two candidates who, for the most part, they don't like, they don't trust, and they find to be dishonest. Is it fair to say the system failed us, or is that not fair?
I think it's fair to say the system failed us. I mean, this has been coming for a long time. As I go over in my book, when the system changed way back in between 68 and 72.
From smoke-filled rooms.
From smoke-filled rooms to these wide-open primaries, people worried about exactly this. They worried about a Trump-like candidate. They worried about some demagogue type taking over the system, somebody who was not qualified to be president.
But people aren't crazy about Hillary Clinton either.
No, they're not qualified about Hillary Clinton either. On the other hand, at least she has qualifications, but she has other problems.
So is the solution smoke-filled rooms all over again?
Well,
too much democracy? Is that what ruined it?
I'll tell you something. I predict that the Republican Party, especially in the interim, particularly if this goes down as we think it's going to go down, I predict that they're going to take a serious look at some 21st century version of a smoke-filled room.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's get to the current book. So presidents failing. I want to do two examples you cite in your book. Well, let's deal with current events. President Obama and W, the rollout of the Affordable Care Act and Katrina. Let's start with Katrina first. Why such a failure, and what should he have done to have succeeded and saved a lot of lives?
Well, in Katrina, in the rollout, in all the examples I use in the book, what the presidents have done is they haven't paid attention to organizational capacity. They just assumed that the government was there and was going to work, even though there were multitudes of signs in all the examples I use that something was wrong, okay, with the agencies that failed. Now, that doesn't mean everything's wrong with the government. It just means in these particular instances. So with Katrina, you know, it had been moved from a freestanding agency into a mammoth department. The leadership was 3 layers down. There was no direct access to the president.
This is FEMA we're talking about.
This is FEMA,
You're doing a heck of a job, Brownie.
You're doing a heck of a job, Brownie. I mean, but way before that happened, it was clear that FEMA was not set up to do a heck of a job, and you could have known that. Part of the argument I make in the book is that sometimes these failures are knowable. They are not just acts of God.
And one of the things they should have known about FEMA, too much focus on terrorism, I'm not saying they shouldn't have, and too little focus on domestic problems.
Well, yeah, the irony here is that they got the terrorism thing exactly right. They have a fantastic paper on terrorism, but the fact is that a catastrophic event is a catastrophic event. Doesn't matter whether it's a terrorist or a hurricane.
So how did Barack Obama blow the rollout of the Affordable Care? It's amazing it even lasted this long after that disaster. Why did that happen?
Again, he gave it to an agency, called CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, that was already overwhelmed.
We're just talking about them and their failures in terms of transplants.
Oh, yes, exactly, you were. Yeah, that agency has been on the high-risk list ever since the high-risk list was invented 15 years ago.
It was run by a guy who's generally seen as a healthcare, Don Berwick, who's a local guy.
Oh yeah, no, it's not the leadership per se, although they don't keep leaders for a long enough time. This is an agency that's been under incredible stress. It hasn't been given the resources to manage all the things it's supposed to manage. And so here it is in crisis, and Obama throws onto it yet another big mission.
Okay,
it
so
was going to fail.
Okay, so they didn't understand organizational capacity, and you know, in a classroom at the Kennedy School, I get that.
Right.
But what is that? So, what should George W. Bush have done to have avoided this, and what should Barack Obama have done to avoid his problem with the ACA, Affordable Care Act?
What I ask presidents to do in the book is that the minute they get in office, they have got to spend a little bit less time talking and traveling and a little bit more time understanding the pieces of the government that they've got and which ones are in trouble and which ones are actually doing good stuff. I mean, one of the points I make is that in a government that's this big, something is always going right and always going wrong at exactly the same time.
Well, you know, your former boss said the era of big government is over, and some of us wept at that particular moment when Bill Clinton said it. But is it possible that what you want can't be done because it is too big? Essentially, that a lot of the conservatives are right. This is unmanageable, even with the best of intentions, and maybe we have to shrink it a little so that we can manage it better.
Well, my argument to that is that, first of all, conservatives ought to be as interested in government capacity as liberals, because the liberals want it all to work. The conservatives don't know how to shrink it. They haven't. We've had since 1994 conservative control of government. They haven't shrunk it one darn bit. So that's the first thing. But I think the second thing is it is knowable. Okay, there are many, many warning signs. There's the Government Accounting Office. There's the Congressional Research Service. These things are knowable, but presidents don't make the time to know something about the government they're running.
You know, again, in the abstract, I totally agree with you. But one of the things you mentioned a minute ago, and you say in your book, and you don't use these words, too much speechifying and too little governing. Speechifying is what brings the American people along. Let's assume they did this brilliant management job. They became managers-in-chief, which many people think is why Charlie Baker was elected governor of Massachusetts. You know, fix it, manage it. And I mean that in a positive way, I mean in a critical way. Okay, I focus on that. But oops, I forgot to do the talking that ensures the American people come along for the ride. So the bottom line is you got to do a balance. You just got to pay more attention to management.
Right. I'm saying I have a little drawing in the book about policy, communication, and implementation. And my argument is you got to do all three equally. And right now you have presidents, because, as you said, they think it's too big, that are ignoring the implementation.
Okay, so if I read your book and put your theses to work, you have this thing about how-to for voters. You don't call it that, but I would make the case that the last person you should have ever elected under the Elaine Kamarck theory is Barack Obama, who never managed anything in his life.
Right.
And people may love him and love his ideology, but based on your school of thinking, people like that shouldn't go from whatever they go, sitting on a board of directors like the Senate, to being president of the United States. Is that a fair statement?
Well, it's sort of a fair statement, yes, because Barack Obama underperformed, and I think his closest supporters will say he underperformed. People were disappointed that he didn't bring about all the wonderful things that I'm a supporter of his too. I mean, all the things that we hoped he was going to do, he really couldn't do very many of them. I mean, he had a couple of good successes, and he's now finally gotten over 50% in approval ratings.
So you're not a Democrat who blames the Republicans. You're a Democrat who in part blames the fact that he didn't spend enough time worrying about organizational capacity and management.
That's exactly right. And I make that argument for Democrats and Republicans. I make it for Jimmy Carter, for Barack Obama, for George H. Bush. I mean, George W. Bush, sorry. All three of them looked at the federal government as some foreign thing that they couldn't get a hold of. And then when the federal government blew up in their faces, they took on deep political hurt, which kept them then from accomplishing anything else. So Barack Obama never could get immigration reform done.
So this is, if I can summarize, a how-to book for presidents and a how-to book for voters. Is that a fair
assessment? That's exactly right. It's a how-to book for presidents and voters.
Great to see you.
Great to see you,
Appreciate it. The book, again, is Why Presidents Fail, for real people, by the way, and how they can succeed again. Hopefully both the candidates are reading up.